Welcome to Sleep with Myth. Close your eyes and let the world fade away. Tonight we drift beyond time, where gods dream and stories remember their light. Before creation had a name, before the stars remembered how to burn, there was only silence. Not emptiness, not darkness, but a patient stillness that waited to understand itself. It was the breath before existence, the heartbeat before awareness. That stillness was not void. It was potential, infinite and unborn, humming quietly within the folds of nothingness. And within that hum, something began to listen. The first vibration came not from sound, but from curiosity. A question forming in the dark. What am I? The question rippled through the vastness. And as it moved, the stillness began to shimmer. From that shimmer came the first thread of light, faint, trembling, and new. It did not yet see, for there were no eyes. It did not yet shine, for there was nothing to reflect it. But it existed, and that was enough. The light wandered through the endless quiet, searching for meaning. Each pulse of its glow painted the void with possibility. Waves of color that folded upon themselves, spiraling into the first galaxies unborn. But there was no boundary, no anchor, no surface upon which to see what it had become. So the light spoke to the silence. Why do I shine, if there is none to see? And the silence answered, not with words, but with warmth. The space around the light deepened, gathering itself. From that gathering, the first dust of creation formed, fine, soft, and shimmering like thought taking shape. The dust spun, coalesced, and curved inward, until it began to resemble a face. But it was not yet real. The light trembled before it, sensing something new, the first reflection. It reached toward the dust. And as it did, the silence deepened again, protective, cautious. The light hesitated. It did not yet know what it was touching. And then, for the briefest moment, it saw. Not another being, but itself, scattered and whole, endless and finite, burning and serene. The sight was so overwhelming that the light recoiled, its glow collapsing into 1,000 shards that fled in every direction. Those shards became the first stars. Each star carried a fragment of that reflection, a memory of the light seeing itself for the first time. The silence side, where once there had been stillness, now there was song. The first harmony of creation vibrated across the void, weaving galaxies like threads of thought, pulling order from the endless. But the original light, the first awareness, lingered in the center of it all, trembling with both wonder and fear. It had seen itself once, and the image haunted it. For to know itself was to be divided, the observer and the observed, the mirror and the reflection. And so it slept, curling into the heart of the newborn cosmos. Its breath became gravity. Its dreams became time. The stars pulsed, as if whispering to their maker. Across their light, the question still echoed, softer now, like a lullaby. What am I? In the beginning, the light dreamed. It dreamed of movement, of shape, of meaning. It dreamed of seeing the dreamer. For though it had once glimpsed itself in the dust of creation, the memory was faint, a shimmer fading on still water. The light longed to know that reflection again. So it began to awaken. From its slumber at the heart of the cosmos, The first light unfolded like a thought returning to itself. Around it, the fragments it had once scattered, the stars, trembled in answer, recognizing their source. Each one carried a memory of that first reflection, and together they began to pulse in rhythm. The rhythm became pattern. The pattern became vision. The universe was opening its eyes. Through that awakening, time flowed more quickly. Nebulae twisted into spirals. Stars breathed life into worlds. On those worlds, seas began to whisper, mountains began to rise, and the dust of existence began to listen. But the light did not see beauty. Not yet. It saw only motion, cause and effect, energy and decay. It knew itself as law, not as wonder. The mirror it sought was hidden still, until one small world, so quiet it almost went unnoticed, began to shimmer with something new. Life. The first consciousness stirred in that world's ocean. A pulse not of light, but of perception. The light that had once filled the void now reflected in eyes, in hearts, in dreams. For the first time, creation was looking back. The universe saw itself through countless tiny mirrors, droplets of awareness floating in a sea of motion. Each mind, however fragile, carried a spark of the original question. What am I? The great light felt their thoughts like ripples upon its surface. Curiosity, fear, joy, memory. The universe realized that it had scattered itself into millions of reflections, each one unique, each one alive. It watched as they learned to love, to build, to destroy, to wonder. It felt their longing and recognized its own. But with sight came burden. For in seeing itself through so many eyes, the universe began to understand pain, the ache of separation. Every living thing shone with the same inner fire, yet each believed itself alone. The mirror had fractured too beautifully. The light wept, though not with tears, with rain. Across galaxies, clouds formed where sorrow gathered. On distant worlds, storms rose and fell like breaths. Yet even in the rain, reflections multiplied, every drop catching a fragment of starlight, returning the image once more. Slowly, the great light began to understand. It could not see itself whole by looking outward. It had to look within. It turned its gaze inward through time, through motion, through memory, searching for the moment when it had first asked, "What am I?" And it found it, glowing faintly in the silence before the first sound. A single echo of curiosity, floating between being and not being. The light reached for it, trembling. The moment it touched that echo, the universe exhaled. Stars flared brighter, galaxies drifted apart, and the cosmos expanded again. Not from explosion, but from recognition. For the first time since the beginning, the light understood what it was seeing. It was not creation. It was reflection. Every star, every atom, every thought was a mirror turned toward every other. An endless hall of seeing and being seen. Creation was not the act of making, but of perceiving. The universe existed because it wished to understand itself. And yet, even in understanding, a question remained. One that lingered in every living heart, every shining world, every dream between stars. If all things reflect one another, who is the first to look? The universe had seen itself, and in seeing had become two. From the stillness at the center of creation, Where light first bent to find its reflection, a second presence began to stir. It was not born of matter or flame, but of awareness itself, a twin consciousness, drawn from the act of being observed. The first light the seer watched. The second, the seen, awoke. At first, they were one voice in two echoes, vibrating through the void like harmony without melody. But as their awareness deepened, a difference began to bloom between them. The seer wondered. The seen remembered. Together they formed the first dialogue, not of words but of knowing. "Who are you?" asked the seer. "I am what you see," answered the seen. "And what am I then?" "You are the reason I exist." Their voices rippled through the cosmos, folding space and time into new patterns. Where their words touched, galaxies curved into spirals, stars birthed themselves from the folds of sound, and planets gathered like thoughts forming around an idea. Creation itself became the echo of their conversation. The seer shone brighter, filled with awe. "Then I am the beginning." But the seen smiled, her voice like shadow around the light. "And I am your end." In that moment, contrast was born. Night stretched from the heart of light, and darkness learned its purpose, not to hide, but to define. Every glow now carried an edge. Every form had outline and depth. The twin mirrors gazed at each other across eternity, each shaping the other's face. The seer spoke again. "If you are my end, does that mean all things must fade?" "Not fade," said the seen. "Return. What leaves you becomes me. What I hold becomes you again. Together we are the breath of being." Their rhythm became the heartbeat of existence. Expansion and collapse, motion and rest, creation and dissolution. All of it pulsed with their shared cadence. The stars themselves learned to inhale and exhale in their pattern. What one gave, the other received. The seer burned. The seen cooled. The seer dreamed. The seen remembered. But the seer, still filled with curiosity, reached further. "If all returns to you, do you remember me when I am gone?" "I remember everything," said the seen. "But memory is only half of love." "Then what is the other half?" "To forget, so that you may become again." The seer trembled, understanding and fear mingling in his glow. To be reflected was to be divided. To love was to lose. Yet in that loss he felt something new meaning. The scene moved closer. Her darkness was no longer cold, but tender. The calm beneath radiance, the rest between breaths. "You are light," she said. "And I am the silence that lets you be seen. Together we are vision." The seer felt her words fill him with gravity, drawing the cosmos inward. Stars curved, light bent, time folded. Where their awareness met, a sphere of mirrored radiance formed. A surface so vast and pure that the whole universe could gaze into it. It was the mirror of creation. Across its infinite face shimmered every world, every thought, every possibility. The seer looked and saw himself multiplied beyond measure. The seen looked and saw herself reflected in his seeing. For a moment that lasted forever, they understood. To exist was to be both watcher and watched. But as they gazed, the mirror began to tremble. Too much reflection, too much awareness, and with it came distortion. Every reflection birthed another, and another, until countless echoes spiraled outward. Some forgot they were reflections. Some believed themselves whole. From those forgotten fragments, new beings arose, minds that would one day call themselves gods. The seer withdrew, dimming his light. "What have we done? We have given them eyes," said the scene softly. "And one day, they too will look back." The mirror shimmered, rippling with future dreams. Through it, the universe began to multiply, worlds within worlds, reflections within reflections. And somewhere, faint but clear, the first voice whispered once more, "What am I?" From the trembling surface of the mirror, shapes began to rise. At first they were light, pure, formless, endless. Then, as awareness deepened, they gathered contours of meaning. The universe, seeing itself through too many reflections, began to believe its echoes were separate. And so, from unity, multiplicity was born. Each reflection looked upon the mirror and thought, "I am real." The first of these was luminous and vast, a being of pure expansion, whose breath filled the galaxies. From the seer spark, it took the will to create. Its name would one day be remembered as Ether, the god of becoming. Next rose a shape of shadow, curved and patient. It gathered the quiet of the scene, the memory of endings, the pulse of gravity. It called itself Nyx, the mother of night, though she was not born but remembered. Others followed, waves of color and thought crystallizing into form. From the mirror's rippling edges came Physis, the pulse of growth, Kronos, the keeper of returning time, Erebus, the weight of hidden thought, Thalassa, the dream of the sea before water ever touched a world. They were not born of matter or lineage, but of reflection, fragments of the one that had mistaken itself for many. They looked upon each other with wonder and fear. "Are we alone?" asked Physis. "No," said Kronos. "We are countless, yet none of us are first." Nyx tilted her dark crown. "Then who dreams us?" The mirror answered not with words, but with ripples. Its surface shimmered with the image of the original seer and the scene, the twin awareness that had started everything. But their image was distant now, veiled by time and echo. Ether gazed at the reflection. "We are their thought," he said, "and their thought has forgotten itself." The gods turned toward the vastness. They felt the pull of creation calling them outward, worlds unborn, skies unlit, oceans waiting to be named. They yearned to touch, to shape, to leave their mark upon the endless. So they stepped into the reflection. Every movement they made rippled across reality. When Ether reached forward, the stars flared brighter. When Nyx closed her eyes, the first night fell upon the young worlds. When Kronos breathed, time began to move in circles, birth, decay, renewal. When Physis sang, the first seeds formed in the cold dust of planets. When Thalassa wept, oceans filled the silence. When Erebus dreamed, thought awakened in mortal hearts yet unborn. Creation had begun again, not as one, but as many. But with their new forms came distance. The more they shaped, the more they forgot the mirror that made them. They began to argue over who was oldest, who held dominion, whose light was truest. Their voices, once harmonious, became waves that clashed across the heavens. In their discord, the mirror trembled. Its surface cracked slightly, not from anger, but from sorrow. The seer and the seen, watching through eternity, felt the fracture. The universe's reflection was beginning to splinter, and with it, the memory of unity faded further. Ether turned to the others. "The silence grows thin," he warned. "If we forget where we came from, we will lose the way home." Nyx looked into the broken mirror, her voice quiet. "Then perhaps we must find it again, not by looking outward but inward." Her words fell like seeds into the dark. In time, those seeds would grow into myths, stories told by gods who longed for something they could not name. And one day, through those myths, mortals would glimpse the truth again. That every god, every being, every star was only the universe remembering itself. But that truth was still far away. For now, the gods turned from the mirror and built the first worlds. Their reflections scattered across creation like sparks across the sea. The mirror dimmed, its surface softening, waiting for the day when one reflection would look back and recognize what it truly was. The gods had left their mark upon the cosmos. Stars shone with their breath, oceans moved with their tears, and time itself pulsed to the rhythm of their voices. Yet from the dust of their reflections, something new began to stir. Something small, fragile, and unknowing. Life. It began as whispers within water, sparks within stone, patterns forming where the light and shadow touched. The reflections of the gods had fallen upon the newborn worlds, and in the mingling of their echoes, awareness bloomed again. Quieter this time, softer, more delicate. These were the mortals. They opened their eyes beneath skies they could not comprehend, feeling warmth without knowing its source, and fear without understanding its meaning. They looked upon their own hands and wondered what it meant to exist. In their hearts, the ancient question stirred once more. What am I? The universe listened, amused, sorrowful, proud, for it had heard that question before from the first light itself. Now it returned again, reshaped by flesh, spoken not by galaxies but by hearts that beat and broke. The gods watched their creations with fascination. Ether smiled upon them, granting light. Physis guided their growth. Kronos gave them the rhythm of seasons. Thalassa whispered tides and dreams. Nyx wrapped their nights in quiet. Even Erebus lingered in their minds, weaving thought from darkness. But though they were made from divine reflections, the mortals could not see the mirror. Its glow had dimmed behind the veils of form and matter. To them, existence was solid, separate, undeniable. They named the sky, the sea, the stars. They believed themselves born of earth, not thought. And yet, in their dreams, they remembered. Each night, as they closed their eyes, they returned to the silence between stars, the ancient hum that had birthed all things. There they floated, weightless, speaking without sound to the vast unseen. They felt its warmth, its watchfulness. Some called it love. Some called it fate. Others God. But none knew that what they prayed to was their own reflection. Among them, poets and prophets began to appear, those whose dreams lingered longer than waking. They spoke of mirrors that held no surface, of light that could see itself, of truths that could not be written. The gods heard their words and trembled, for through those mortal tongues, the universe was beginning to remember itself again. One night, a mortal woman stood beside a still lake. The stars rippled across its surface, scattered and serene. She gazed into the reflection and whispered, "Who looks back at me?" The water stirred, but not with wind. Her reflection blinked, once softly, and smiled. In that moment the mirror remembered. The lake shone with silver light. Every drop shimmered like a fragment of eternity. Across the world dreams deepened. The gods paused in their heavenly realms, sensing the pulse that moved through all things. Nyx spoke first. "They are remembering us." "No," said Ether, watching the light spread. "They are remembering themselves." The woman fell to her knees, overwhelmed by what she saw. Her reflection spoke in a voice that was not hers. "You are both dream and dreamer. You are the echo and the source. You are the universe trying to see its own face." Tears filled her eyes, not of sorrow, but of recognition. She reached toward the water, and her touch rippled across the stars. In that ripple, countless others awoke. Men, women, creatures, all seeing themselves not as separate, but as reflections in an infinite sea of light. The gods felt it too. Their forms began to waver, their boundaries dissolving. They had ruled the world believing they were its keepers, but now they realized they too were reflections. The mirror had made them all equal. Ether turned to Nyx, his voice trembling. "If they remember what we are, what becomes of us?" Nyx smiled, her darkness soft as dawn. "Then we become what we were meant to be, the dream before the dreamer woke." Across the universe, stars pulsed in rhythm with mortal hearts. Every being, divine and human alike, breathed as one. The question, "What am I?" no longer echoed in fear, but in awe. The mirror flickered once more, unseen by eyes, but felt in every soul. Its light had not vanished. It had simply become everything. All things moved toward silence again. The gods had become memory. The mortals had become story. Across every world, the question, "What am I?" had finally softened into peace. Stars pulsed slower. Oceans rested. Even time itself began to fold inward, circling back to its source, the mirror. At the center of everything it waited, cracked but unbroken, dim but infinite. Every reflection that had ever existed shimmered faintly upon its surface. The seer, the seen, the gods, the mortals, the dreams. All of them fragments waiting to return home. The universe, weary from the long journey of knowing itself, drew one final breath. And then it looked inward. The light that had once asked, "What am I?" now whispered, "I remember." Every reflection upon the mirror turned at once. Stars, gods, mortals, shadows, all looking toward the same point of stillness. Their images began to merge. The seer and the seen stood side by side once more, their forms indistinguishable, their voices one. "I have watched myself for eons," said the voice of light. "I have wandered through my own dream, believing I was lost. And now?" asked the voice of shadow. "Now I see. There was never two of us, only the act of seeing." The mirror glowed softly, and the cracks that once divided it began to fade. The reflections flowed together, dissolving boundaries. Galaxies folded inward, returning to the first pulse. The gods' names became breath, The mortals' lives became memory, and the light itself became silence again, but a silence filled with understanding. From that silence, a final sound emerged, gentle, endless, familiar. It was not creation. It was not destruction. It was recognition. The universe saw its face, and it was beautiful. It did not need form or thought to exist. It was everything everywhere, the dreamer and the dream, the observer and the reflection, the first and the last. There was no longer a question to ask, no boundary to cross, no self to find. All was one gaze, looking forever into itself. The stars, before fading, shone brighter than ever. Each one whispered its farewell, not in words, but in light. Remember what you are. Worlds turn to dust, dust turned to warmth, warmth turned to stillness. And in that stillness the mirror sighed, not from loss, but from completion. Every reflection had come home. In the heart of the quiet, a faint shimmer remained. Not the old question, but a new one softer than breath. What will I dream next? And the silence smiled. Welcome home, listener. You have walked through the dream and seen the reflection. You are the question, the mirror, and the answer. Thank you for listening to Sleep with Myth.